Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Alpine Odyssey, where we are moving on into the new section of the park today. It is going to be a few months until this area is done, probably at this rate, and we want to get started here. We worked on the live stream initially on the first kind of tile set just to make sure we could get some sort of theme going, and you guys really helped out with that, choosing some of the colors, the contrast, and the overall feel. And I do appreciate you guys coming out to those, and that really helps me stay motivated and keep pushing through with this massive project all by myself. What we got going on is that I copied the wall section that we made on stream and made it a little bit thicker by simply rotating it around, and we are making some large wall structures. And these are kind of the more solid walls that you would find supporting a lot of the tiers, terrace effects that you find in a lot of these kind of Aztec Mayan empires. Even places in India have a very similar build style if you think about it. Very stone heavy, very thick foundations everywhere. And you guys know me, I definitely prefer making all my buildings very heavy and weighty. So this style is something that I feel pretty at home with. We are, of course, making some ruined variations. You guys wanted the area to be a little bit more run down. And don't worry, the section after this is supposed to be the antiquities section. However, that one's going to be a little bit more pristine and clean looking than this one. So it's going to go kind of ancient civilization into another ancient civilization. However, this one's going to be a little bit, just better looking, well kept, and as it should. We're making some tall kind of pillar variants. I've noticed a few areas where they just kind of have these decorative pillars kind of lining pathways, roadways. Now, I don't know, based off of the current ruins and those reference images, if these pillars were necessarily used for anything beyond decoration. Some of you guys might actually know that, but I don't really necessarily research a whole lot into these things. I more or less just kind of aesthetically put them together, and what their actual purpose was, beyond me. But the best way to do this is, of course, make the pristine version first, and then go ahead and almost simulate the destruction over time. So we took off the top piece, threw it onto the ground, and made it look like it kind of crashed there and broke apart. We were doing pretty much the same thing over and over, and each time the pillar gets more broken apart and smaller as the pieces kind of hit the ground, until it's basically just a little pile like this. And for 3 to 4 pieces, and you have yourself a decent selection to choose from. Of course, you have to keep in mind that the footprint gets wider and wider the more destruction you add, I guess depending upon how you take it apart. And that kind of limits its places it can be laid down. However, you can kind of work around that, clean it up if you really need to. You can see that this piece there didn't feel like it fit alongside the road because it was just taking over too much of the path, and I don't want people to necessarily walk through these things. So tucking it in behind one of the small retaining walls just creates additional little rubble pieces. Now, of course, we're going to add in some of that thicker wall element here along the train track. And this episode, we're really focusing on this front kind of connecting plaza and the way the train track kind of is going to interact with this initial bank. This is going to be the kind of the first extension to the train that we've done in quite a while. And it takes a little bit of time, working with slopes, getting this whole thing laid out. But, you want this to go all the way around the whole lake surface. We're not going to have a train station in this area. I feel like it's just going to probably be too cluttered if I did that. And I just really want to do a train station in every other section here in Alpine Odyssey. That way they're spaced out. We encourage some people to actually walk around in between areas. If they have to go a far distance, they're more than welcome to actually use the train itself. And increasing the retaining wall, using the upper kind of broken section as a kind of reference point for this thing. and then we can work on the lower supports, which the European section, we use a lot of wood timber frames supporting a very heavy kind of supported walkway. This one's going to be all stone because everything else here is like that, and it also takes up a lot less pieces than, say, a normal bridge out of wood would take, especially what we're doing back there. Those I kind of want to be a little bit more part count sensitive going forward, just to try and keep the frame rate as high as possible for as long as possible. We're going to add a little bit of a timber frame element on top of that, and not to say that we're not going to have a lot of detail, but I just kind of want to use parts and cover more broad areas, and plus that might help with the progress kind of speeding along a little bit as well. Now this does have a slope to it, and we can't slope these walls just because they are grid items, and so we're going to step them up. And the way I'm going to have to transition these into each other is that every time we have a step up and kind of the seam up here, we're going to put a pillar, one of those pristine pillars that we made, and one that's going to add some nice vertical elements and a little bit of a kind of default decoration here, but it also helps smooth out this transition so it doesn't look quite as jagged. You can see we're also keeping the double wide train track going in there right now. Basically right after the bridge here, the train tracks will actually permanently split. So this is kind of the last bit of the double wide section that we're going to be doing. And I figured it would just be better to continue this all the way down pretty much till the lake's edge, so that these trains, I don't want to clutter up the waterways too much. I feel like in the last section it got covered a lot between the roller coaster, the train tracks, bridges, things like that. So I think for here, for the rest of the way, it would be nice to keep that as open as possible. A lot of the other times I spent this episode with kind of making this whole area run down, you can do only so much with that structural element. It takes a lot of overgrowth a lot of the times to really sell the age of the destruction. So, adding ivy, adding a lot of those plants there, making sure this wooden platform gets copied over correctly and its railing gets added and seals that off so people, stay away from the train tracks. And hopefully the trees and shrubs here in this area with the rocks will keep people away from wandering down there. I will eventually build a little bit of a wall, and we actually get to do some new tree types in this area. So we're adding some palm trees, some of the more tropical kind of style elements in this area, and ferns and things, these really broadly kind of structures. No more evergreens in this section. It really wouldn't make much sense. I mean, I guess in theory you could have a few here and there, but they would probably be more smaller shrubs than actual tall pine trees that we have over in the European section. A lot of colorful flowers, things like that. Here is the wooden fence going in, keeping people off that railroad section, and of course out of the plants. You can offset these from the roadway to give you little cubbies to potentially put some benches or some other things that you might need along the main path. And just like in the main European Main Street, this is more of the welcome plaza. So over there we have kind of this large open space. That's kind of what I'm thinking with these pillars. It's kind of going to ease us into the new theme. Now, it still definitely clashes, kind of butts up right up against this European section, but I'm fine with that. I think it's kind of interesting to see these two things kind of blend together. The northern side is that playground that's in the European theme. The southern side that's creeping up is a little bit more of the Aztec Mayan theme. And they just kind of look well together, especially when you start throwing in a lot of the plants and overgrowth. Here are our smaller kind of custom support walls there that we made. They're basically very heavily modeled off the vertical pillars in the main structure there, just essentially turned sideways, and some more vertical line elements. We're going to be making some wooden covered kind of shade elements for the benches and seating area. And these swamp kind of seaweed structures are really great for making the thing look a little bit, it's like thatch, but with more of a leafy element, and it makes it look a little bit different than the European section, because you just want these things to be more unique as you go through. So we'll put the path running through this main structure, and just like the ticket booth area at the front of the park, these are going to house 2 more information booths. We're going to need a decent amount of them, and I think having 2 at the beginning of each section will mean that people can hopefully treat each section almost as its own separate park, and they don't have to go into the other sections for their needs as much as if we only had the information booths at the front. We're going to add some large stone heavy planters by the staircase here, using the fairy tale kind of elements just to make sure there's some carving of some kind, and then adding plenty of greenery elements around here as well, picking up a lot of these column bases because they were kind of floating, and you'll notice that we're not really messing with the terrain too much. The thing with Planet Coaster is because the guests actually don't walk on the grass, you don't necessarily have to really have any ground at all, except for areas where you want kind of natural elements to poke through, like you have here. But if you throw in heavy enough shrubs, they don't see the terrain underneath of it. So if people are having trouble with pathways going up slopes or anything like that, I really recommend just raise the pathway off the ground, and then build support structures to it so it kind of blends off and it looks like it actually is on the ground. It's kind of a trick to get around the poor path making in Planet Coaster. It is kind of its one major flaw that I don't think there's much they can do about it unless they completely change the way paths work and get laid out. So I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but we can always hope and see. Maybe with the new kind of Dinosaur Jurassic Park game that they're making, it could be a chance for them to experiment in a different pathing system that might even be brought over into Planet Coaster. One can hope. From the trailer, it does look like they just kind of paint the path onto the ground, and I think that would be a cool way for Planet Coaster to do it, and then keep the current path system for like bridges and things, because it's still versatile there. Raised paths are a lot easier to work with. And yeah, now we have the roof after the pathing tirade that I just went on for these covered walkways. We're going to have a decent amount of these covered walkways going through the area. They will connect to some buildings, they'll connect to plazas, that whole left side there. I do plan on making an open plaza. Some of it might have some shops and things just along the side, kind of street stalls, and then the others will just be used as kind of planter space for more greenery and decorations. So, they're very versatile in terms of how they can be laid out. And of course, you want to make sure it actually looks like it's touching the ground instead of floating about half a foot off of it. And so that's why you put these heavy stone footers at the very, very bottom and kind of cap that off there. So that is pretty much it for today's speed build. I know it's probably a little bit shorter than the past couple episodes of Alpine Odyssey, but we have to try out this new theme, and it's going to be a little bit slow going here at the start as I get used to it. Anyways, let's go ahead over into real time, and you guys will give me some feedback. Alright, so here we are. Taking a look in real time, you can see the train climbing up this hill. It is still a rather steep hill. I'll leave it up to you guys if you want me to kind of decrease the slope on that. I know trains really can't climb slopes very well. Usually I think they were limited to about a 4-degree incline. That is definitely more than 4-degree, but of course it is also a video game. So if you guys like the looks of it, I think that is more important than the realism. We have some really nice greenery effects starting to happen here, which is a lot different than the European section. The European section is very clean. This one's a little bit more naturalistic, a little bit more messy, and reminds me a lot of the area back there where we just kind of did some rocks and some trees to make it look kind of in the wilderness, and this is going to have a lot of that. So you're going to, from above, eventually have some of these stone structures poking out through the trees. However, it's going to fill in a lot of this dead space in between the areas, a lot more densely than the previous area. Of course, we'll have some plazas. This lower area here is going to be a plaza. Plus, you know, we need a sight line for the train. The train can't just forever run along this stone wall. We're going to have to bring it down a little bit so that people can actually see up into the area. And hopefully, you know, we'll have some rides and things that I might be able to see as well. Up it goes. Bye, train. Here is our information booth structure that we built on string. You guys, you know, helped me with the wooden elements. You guys did think it was a little bit weird that I was adding wood to the structure, but for me, I'm kind of treating it like a different colored stone more so than anything. I'm gonna have to put some planters underground to help people from cutting corners like that mechanic just did. And we have our 2 information booths in here. And of course, just like every other building in Alpine Odyssey, I will end up doing an interior. It's just going to take a while before we get there. Still not even done with the interiors in the European section. But I think, you know, we'll get there eventually. We'll have to do a lot of kind of wallpapering, covering a lot of the kind of sticking through bits and pieces here and there. And then you get these nice covered walkways. They very much remind me of Egyptian buildings, but I guess all these kind of ancient Stone Age structures kind of have the same feeling to them. And, you know, you just get some good sight lines of just breaking up with some lower shrubs. You get some tall trunks from the palm trees, and then off in the distance you can see some of the pillars. Now, the nice thing, too, about us not having a sight line so much into the European section at this point, I know a lot of you might think it looks weird. You know, how the European section is very open, right? So you come in here and you can just see pretty much all around you. And then you enter this area here where you just kind of look forward and you would expect there to be a really good sight line, right? Kind of looking down this pathway and straight onto the lake. However, I wanted this to kind of block some of the next section. So you kind of get that discovery feeling all over again. So the main sight lines will actually be more over in this area, kind of looking around itself rather than being able to look back in the previous section. So that's why this wall of green I think is super important. Kind of separates the 2 areas in a pretty natural looking way, at least. And of course, you know, as you progress through here, you'll at least be able to see across the lake in areas, and that'll be nice. And as we progress, we might think about a few sight lines to keep, like, you know, maybe always being able to see the windmill, maybe always being able to see the temple that's going to go here. Maybe, I guess the next one will be just another temple in the antiquity area. But we'll see how that goes when we actually get there. But the pathways are being added. I do want to add some ramps for the handicapped people. I know I'm going to get a comment on that, so that is something I am thinking about. I just don't quite know where it's going to go in this area. We have some benches, we have, you know, the very dense foliage that you would expect in this section, and I just like the ruined pillars. Like, I think it blends the area decently. You know, you get elements of something new with something old and a little bit modern going through there, and it does feel like a theme park. So that's it for today's episode of Planet Coaster. If you guys are enjoying the videos, feel free to subscribe to my channel for more creative goodness such as this. Go ahead and hit that like button. Leave a comment down below on what you guys think so far, and I will see you in the next video.